8 spine-chilling Kentucky horror stories, terrifying encounters alone in the dark revealed. Sarah stared at the old farmhouse, its weathered wood glowing ominously under the afternoon sun. She had promised herself a fresh start with her son, Evan, away from the chaos of the city. Yet, even as they unloaded their boxes, a forbidding sense of dread crept in, the silence around them thick and suffocating, throbbing with unseen life. Shadows danced across her vision, and for a moment, she felt as if the house was whispering its secrets at her. The first night was when the nightmares began. Evan stirred in his sleep, moaning about a woman in the window. Sarah's heart raced. What could he mean? Was it a reflection of their new life, or something deeper? Shaking off her unease, she told him it was just a dream. Just the old house settling, she thought as creaks echoed in the night, each one louder than the last. But then silence. Pure, dreadful silence. Days blurred into weeks. What was once quaint began to feel sinister, each crack in the walls seemed to groan with secrets. At twilight, Sarah spotted quick shadows flitting outside, always just out of sight. Dark silhouettes slipped between the trees. Were they just her eyes playing tricks, or something more? The whispering only grew louder in her mind. The soft calls of nature turned into hushed conversations that made her skin prickle. Evan was growing more withdrawn, his laughter replaced by terrified glances into the corners of the dim rooms. Her neighbors, with their friendly smiles and warm greetings, soon exchanged those hopeful looks for deeper, more probing stares. During their evening gatherings, tales of local legends emerged, macabre stories filled with witches and sinister rituals echoing around the flickering bonfire. "You stay clear of the woods," one neighbor warned with a chilling smile. "They hold secrets best forgotten." Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The undercurrent of fear rose like smoke. A visit to the sheriff, meant to secure a sense of safety, turned his hardened gaze towards her, brushing aside her mounting dread. "You're just feeling out of place, Sarah. This is how things are around here." His calmness sent chills racing down her spine. "Just give it time," he seemed to imply. That evening, storm clouds gathered above, swirling in a threatening ballet. Sarah heard the chanting drifting from deep within the woods. An otherworldly melody wrapped around her, whispering promises of chaos that made her blood run cold. Peeking from the window, she froze, horrified at the sight of her neighbors gathered in a clearing, their faces shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by flickering flames. What were they doing? Were they pulling her into something she couldn't comprehend? Panic seized her as she gathered her things, heart pounding like a drum. She turned to Evan, but his large, fearful eyes reflected his own terror. The promise of safety in their new home evaporated, shadows closing in like dark tendrils. Gripping his hand tightly, she stole one last glance at their once charming home, now a sinister monument of her hopes. Abruptly, she heard a guttural voice calling her name from the woods, a chilling reminder that they may be trapped in an evil much deeper than she ever imagined. The land was alive, and something was waiting for them to mate its darkness. As they bolted toward the door, Sarah's heart raced, thrumming wildly against her ribcage. "We need to go. Now," she urged, pulling Evan along, his small hand trembling in hers. Each step felt heavier, like the house itself was trying to hold them back, clinging to their souls. The darkness outside loomed, oppressive and thick as tar. Once outside, the chill of the evening air enveloped them. The storm above rumbled ominously, lightning flashing sporadically, illuminating the swaying trees that seemed to hiss and complain at their presence. The chants grew louder, menacing, driving Sarah to keep her gaze fixed on the dark woods ahead. The neighbors were more than just simple folk, they were a gathering of shadows, orchestrating something that prickled the very fabric of her being. Why are they doing that? Evan whispered, his voice cracking, eyes wide and lost in fear. I don't know, Sarah admitted, unable to shake the nagging feeling that any moment could turn fatal. The forest seemed to undulate, the branches reaching out like twisted fingers, desperate to pull them back. She barely registered the jagged edges of the clearing as they stumbled through the brush, heart pounding with the need to escape. Suddenly, the chilling chant from the woods reached a crescendo, the voices rising into a madness that twisted her stomach. Just as she thought they were safe, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man, tall and gaunt, like he was carved from the night itself. His eyes glimmered, reflecting the firelight from behind him. Sarah! He called, his voice both familiar and alien, reverberating with an unsettling echo. Stay, you're meant to stay. A shudder passed through her body, and instinct kicked in. With a fear she had never known, she turned and ran, pulling Evan with her, abandoning reason for raw survival. Each thud of their feet against the earth felt like a funeral drum, announcing their flee from something ancient and dark. Mom! Evan cried, struggling to keep up, glancing fearfully over his shoulder. His gaze widened in horror. They're coming! Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as she dashed forward, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The silhouettes were emerging now, rushing through the underbrush, their features obscured by shadow and madness. She could hear their voices, layered and feverish, cursing and beckoning. The town had become a nest of predators, their intentions suffocating in the stale air. Then, just as they broke through the tree line, the world fell silent. A heavy stillness pressed down upon them, suffocating and thick. They stood before the gravel road that spiraled away from the wooded nightmare, but the darkness felt alive, teetering on the brink of violence. Mom, where do we go? Evan trembled, glancing around for help, as if the road itself could offer salvation. Before she could answer, a deafening clap of thunder split the skies, drenching everything in heavy rain. The storm had arrived, unleashing a downpour that blurred her vision and drowned out their cries. They stumbled forward, slipping on the wet gravel. But as they crossed the threshold onto the road, something shifted behind them. It felt like the whole woods had exhaled in fury. The chanting resumed, but this time it sang of vengeance, filling her ears with the haunting echo of her name. That was when she noticed it, a shadow darting just beyond the edge of the tree line, too quick to be human. It slipped between the trunks. Was it watching them? The shadows were watching. Run! She screamed, dragging Evan into the storm, with the creeping dread of the dark woods swirling behind them. But where could they hide when the darkness wrapped around their hearts like a vice? As they pressed into the downpour, a thought began to gnaw at Sarah's mind. What if the darkness had already claimed them? What if they were never meant to escape? The woods pulsed with malevolent life, and a cold whisper caressed her ear, chilling her to the bone. The question hung dangerously in the air: what if her new home was just the beginning of an ancient curse? They stumbled down the road, the relentless rain pounding against them, as if the very heavens were trying to wash away their sins. The ground was slick and treacherous, each step felt like an invitation for the earth to swallow them whole. Evan was gasping behind her, his small body struggling to keep pace, fatigue and fear battling for dominance in his young heart. Just a little further. Sarah called out, though her own footsteps felt heavy, burdensome. Light flickered somewhere ahead, flickering between tree trunks just beyond her line of sight. Was it warmth? Maybe help? She hesitated, heart racing, forming a decision fraught with anxiety. Mom! What's that light? Evan squinted, pointing ahead, his voice barely making it through the sound of the rain. It could be a house, maybe someone can help. She replied, calculating the odds as the aura of the light beckoned them like a siren's song. But the shadows whispered warnings, ghostly echoes that dragged against her resolve. Stay close, she warned. Together, they approached the light, praying it was not a cruel tease. As they drew nearer, it flickered again, illuminating an old wooden cabin nestled against the trees. Its weathered walls seemed to lean into the storm, as if seeking refuge from the lurking darkness. The light pulsed steadily, warm and golden against the bleak backdrop, and for a fleeting moment, hope clawed its way into her heart. Maybe they have a phone. We can call for help, Sarah said, barely believing the words herself. But just as they reached the door, she halted abruptly. Who lived here? Was it the same kind of people who danced with shadows? With shaking hands, she gripped the doorknob, glancing back at the road they had escaped. The forest loomed, monstrous and watchful, ready to swallow them if they turned back. Mom, Evan whimpered, clutching her shirt. I don't want to go in there. Just a second, she soothed, though her own voice wavered. She turned the knob, and with a creak that screamed like a tortured soul, the door swung open. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit, a clutter of dust-laden furniture, and the flickering flames of an oil lamp danced across the walls. The air smelled stale, like memories of something left too long in the dark. Hello? Sarah called, stepping hesitantly inside, dragging Evan forward. Each footfall echoed, painfully loud, as if the house were holding its breath. An old wooden table sat in the middle, strewn with strange artifacts, bones, twisted roots, and odd symbols etched onto paper. It was the kind of unsettling clutter that sent waves of dread dancing down her spine. Mom, I want to go. Evan's voice trembled. You can't. She hissed. We can't go back out there. But as they took a step deeper, footsteps echoed behind them, a heavy, wet sound seeping from the door. They turned to see the door swing closed, sealing them in darkness. The chanting rose outside again, an angry mob that sensed their fear, palpable and thick. A new silhouette appeared in the dimness, a hooded figure that stepped so softly it felt spectral, gliding rather than walking. The air turned cold, and Sarah's breath hitched. Welcome, it hissed, voice low and gravelly, a twisted reflection of her own nightmares. You've arrived just in time to join the ritual. Evan's face blanched, and for a moment, Sarah felt his tiny fingers clutch tighter, yet she couldn't let go. In the woods, they thought you would run, but oh, how delightful that you came here instead, it continued, every word saturated with malice. Panic flooded Sarah as the figure took another step forward, revealing its face pockmarked, hollow-eyed, a grin that was more a gash than a smile. And then she understood there was no escape. Just as terror gripped her heart fully, a crashing noise erupted from the cabin walls, sending splinters flying. The shadows outside screamed, and she knew they wouldn't be alone for long. Mom, they're coming! Evan cried out. The cabin trembled around them, deep groans vibrating through the wood. Run! Sarah screamed, yanking Evan toward the back, but the walls themselves seemed to twist, sealing their fate. A howl of fury erupted outside, a chorus of voices demanding their presence. In that moment, Sarah realized this was it, an ancient tide she could not fight. They were meant to be a sacrifice, anchored by a fear that cut deeper than skin. But would she let her son fall into the darkness alone? And then, in the heart of that gruesome fate, one question loomed larger than the storm outside: who would they become in the depths of that cursed cabin, and would they ever reclaim the light? The thick air grew heavier, charged with a dread that settled over Sarah like a shroud. She pressed her back against the splintery wall, eyes darting between the hooded figure and Evan's frightened face. Shadows flickered and twisted like living things just beyond their reach, crawling and slithering, eager to pounce. Mom, help! Evan whimpered, and in that one syllable full of grief and fear, everything around them faded away. A loud thud reverberated from the front of the cabin, the door buckling under the weight of bodies outside, their chant now a thunderous roar that threatened to split the air. Each crash sent jolts through Sarah's core, her maternal instincts flaring even as panic gnawed at her resolve. She looked back at the hooded figure, its grin widening with each shudder of the cabin. It was watching her, waiting for her to make the next move. But what could she do? The walls were closing in around them, suffocating with a terror that wrapped around her throat like a noose. "Listen to me, Evan," she whispered harshly, heart racing, hating the quiver in her voice. "We have to find a way out of here. We can't let them have us." The boy nodded, eyes wide as he clung to her with fingers that felt like ice. They could either bolt for the back window or huddle into the corner, hoping the darkness would hide them. The decision felt gargantuan. "Help us!" Evan cried, surprising her with the strength of his voice. It echoed through the cramped space, a flare of desperation that mingled with the madness outside. The hooded figure tilted its head, almost inquisitively. "No one can save you here," it hissed softly, and Sarah felt cold tendrils of despair snake deeper into her mind. "You should embrace the darkness, it will welcome you." With that, the figure lunged, and in that instant, Sarah snapped. With survival instinct kicking in, she bolted towards the window. Evan was right behind her, but the mob roared, their fury growing as they crashed against the door again. Each thud was thunder, vibrating through the cabin. "Keep moving," Sarah shouted, adrenaline pulsing like fire in her veins. She knocked over a chair, sending it clattering to the ground, a distraction bought with the hope it might give them a precious second. As she gripped the window frame, she felt a burn in her lungs, the ghosts of the forest urging her to give in. But there was no time. The window was barred, a heavy wooden latch held fast against the onslaught of the creatures outside. "Mom! They're here!" Evan cried out, pointing. A line of shadowy figures was gathering, their lithe frames barely visible through the rain-soaked glass. They moved with a predatory grace, their eyes gleaming like coals, igniting a fury in Sarah she didn't know she possessed. "Stay back!" she yelled at the window, clawing at the latch, knowing it would do no good. The air filled with the screams of the damned, each word seeped in insatiable hunger. Her heart raced and tears streamed down her cheeks. She was losing it, she could see her sanity slipping like sand through her fingers. Suddenly, the cabin shook violently. The walls groaned again, and an ugly crack formed. Sarah felt it, it was as if the cabin prepared to unleash its fury upon them. "Mom, we have to." The door swung open, but not of its own volition. It blasted off its hinges, revealing more figures, darker and angrier than the last. One stepped forward, the leader, a towering figure cloaked in shadow, with an aura of dread that sucked the warmth from the room. And just like that, everything went still. Silence swept through the cabin, swallowing the noise. It was an unnatural calm, the kind that makes the heart stop. "Welcome to the feast," the leader whispered, its voice a chill that swept across Sarah like death. Frozen in despair, she could see the truth reflected in its hollow eyes, a truth she fought not to accept. She was trapped, not just in the cabin but in the horror of what lay beyond. The question echoed in her mind as the darkness closed in around them, was escape even possible, or were they merely pawns in a game played by ancient forces? As the figures converged, a horrifying realization struck deep: a sacrifice was about to unfold, and either they would be chosen, or the decision loomed, and an ominous laugh erupted from the shadows. Would darkness claim them, or would Sarah summon the strength to fight back? With a sharp intake of breath, she whispered, "Evan, whatever happens we stand together." The shadowy figures swarmed around them, an encroaching tide of terror. The leader loomed, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to absorb the scant light in the room. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribcage, a frantic drumbeat urging her to act, to do something, anything. "Stand back, Evan!" she shouted, shoving her son behind her. The boy complied, eyes brimming with unshed tears, questioning if his mother could protect him from the nightmare unfolding around them. The chanting grew louder, an almost otherworldly melody that echoed off the walls of the cabin. Each word resonated with a hunger that clawed at Sarah's sanity. The air around them thickened, reeking of decay and something more sinister, something alive that pressed against her skin. A flicker of hope ignited within her. "If I can just get to the door." She pushed against the darkness, forcing herself to act, the instinct to flee overpowering every shred of doubt. She darted forward, hoping to outmaneuver the figures, but they shifted like smoke, seamlessly blocking every potential escape. "Mom! They're everywhere!" Evan's voice broke through the chaotic noise, laced with sheer terror. He tugged at her sleeve, grounding her momentarily. She glanced back at him, the anguish on his face anchoring her in that moment. "Stay next to me. We'll fight." Sarah yelled more to rally herself than to calm her son. Gripping the nearest object, she found a heavy candlestick on the floor, the brass cool against her clammy fingers. It felt useless, but in a world where nightmares came to life, she needed a weapon, a talisman against the horrors closing in. The leader stepped forward, eyes locked on her, a malevolent glow dancing within them. "You think you can fight the inevitable? You are already chosen," it hissed. As it spoke, the others began to chant louder, a twisted chorus that pulsed like a heartbeat. Their voices melded into a single entity, a grotesque symphony vibrant with malice. With a primal scream, Sarah swung the candlestick, striking the figure closest to her. The metal connected with a sickening thud, and the figure stumbled back, blurting an unnatural hiss that set the hairs on her neck on end. But it didn't stop them. Instead, the leader's laughter rang out, chilling her to the core like ice water coursing through her veins. "You fight, but you are already bound to us. Your defiance only prolongs the feast." "No!" Sarah shouted, darkness creeping into her voice, robbing her of confidence. Fear clawed at her mind, whispering that she could not fight against an ancient evil. Yet, as Evan trembled beside her, it ignited her resolve. "We fight together." She felt a surge of determination, the maternal instinct pushing her forward, even as shadows crawled along the walls. The chanting crescendoed, a whirlwind of sound that enveloped them. The walls around them seemed to warp, and the very shadows stretched to swallow the light. In that moment of agonizing intensity, Sarah and Evan locked eyes, an unspoken bond transcending their immediate horror. They were alive, and they would not go quietly. Just when it felt as though all was lost, a crackle of energy surged through the air like static. The intensity shifted, and for a brief heartbeat, the figures staggered back, as if the energy around them pulsed against their dark influence. "Evan! Now!" Sarah screamed, sensing their moment. The world outside the cabin faded into oblivion, the forest beyond became a sprawling void. She refocused on the broken window, hope igniting a wild desperation within her. As she darted toward the broken frame, chaos erupted. The figures surged forward, hungry for their prey. Heart in her throat, Sarah leapt, pulling Evan behind her, praying against hope that freedom lay just outside. But as she crashed through the frame, the sensation of being thrust headfirst into a familiar fear washed over her. The forest loomed around them, muted, watchful, unforgiving. And then she saw it, a figure, shadowed and silent, watching from the tree lean, wearing an all-too-familiar grin in that harrowing moment. As the chilling stillness settled around them once more, she realized the forest might have its own secrets, ones they had not yet unearthed. Had they truly escaped, or merely traded one horror for another? The shadows waited. No matter where she turned, the darkness would always whisper, "You can't outrun what already knows you." Sarah stumbled, catching her breath, the metallic tang of adrenaline heavy in the air as she clutched Evan close. The shadows cast eerie shapes under the moonlight, twisted trees looming like silent sentinels. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves, whispering secrets that made her skin crawl. "Mom, what was that?" Evan whispered, his voice trembling as he peered into the dark expanse of the forest. "I don't know, but we need to keep moving," she urged, pushing aside her own fears. They darted deeper into the woods, the canopy above swallowing what little light remained. But the moment they turned, the figure was gone. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. Had it been real? Or just a figment of the terror they had narrowly escaped? Branches cracked behind them, a swift reminder they weren't alone. She hurried through the underbrush, each step feeling like a descent into a nightmare from which she might never wake. The shadows twisted, stretching beyond the trees, reaching for them. "Mom, I'm scared." Evan's voice quivered, barely audible over the frantic pounding in her chest. "Me too," she admitted, forcing the words past her lips. The raw honesty wove an invisible connection between them, strengthening their resolve. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for each other. As they pressed forward, the darkness thickened, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. The air was cold, biting at their skin, and an unsettling stillness claimed the woods. It felt as if the very forest itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable horror to unfold. Suddenly, a faint glow flickered in the distance, a soft, beckoning light glowing like a solitary star against the oppressive night. "Look, Mom. There." Evan pointed, his voice filled with a fragile hope. "Stay close," she cautioned, heart racing as they made their way toward it. Each step was punctuated by the sounds of snapping twigs and shifting leaves. Something was following them. As they approached, the light revealed a clearing. An old bonfire pit lay in the center, the remnants of charred wood still scattered around. It felt strangely inviting, an oasis of warmth in a sea of shadows. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to turn back, to hide in the cover of the trees, but the promise of safety pulled her closer. Then came the whispers, soft but insistent, swirling around them like a cold breeze brushing against their skin. Join us, the chilling chant echoed in the air, wrapping around Sarah's mind, drawing on her deepest fears, her failures, her darkest thoughts. "Mom." Evan's voice shattered the spell. He had frozen just outside the clearing, staring wide-eyed into the darkness that surrounded them. "We shouldn't go in there. Something's wrong." Just as Sarah turned back to reassure him, the shadows rippled and surged forward, a wave of darkness crashing down upon them. Eyes glimmering, alien appeared in the dark, their predatory hunger palpable. "No!" Sarah cried, grabbing Evan's hand tightly as the overwhelming fear swept over her like a cold tide. The shadows loomed, closer now, their grim faces forming out of the dark as if summoned from the very nightmares that clawed at her sanity. With a primal instinct, she pulled Evan toward the safety of the trees. "We have to go back. We can't stay here." But the clearing pulsed, a heartbeat that seemed to echo in her chest. The whispers grew louder, more frenzied. "You cannot leave." As they melded into the shadows, the darkness began to shift, taking on an almost tangible form. The leader, from the cabin, re-emerged from the gloom, grinning wide, teeth glistening in the half-light. She froze, paralyzed with terror. This wasn't an escape, they were walking straight into the mouth of a new nightmare. In that split second of horror, Sarah realized they were not simply prey in the forest's depths. They were now a part of its story, and one that had yet to unfold. What awaited them in the darkness? A deafening heartbeat echoed through the silence, and she understood they had awakened. Something they could never hope to control. Will they survive this night, or are they destined to join the wretched chorus of the lost? The shadows pressed in closer, their edges curling with an intelligence that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. She could feel Evan's small hand tremble in hers, the pulse of panic matching the rapid drumming of her heartbeat. The leader's grin widened, that insidious smile stretching inhumanly as if he could taste their fear, savoring it like a fine wine. "Run!" she shouted, and instinct took over. The moment they turned, the world erupted into chaos. The branches whipped against their skin, the underbrush tugged at their feet. The whispers sharpened, incomprehensible words rising in a cacophony, twisting into guttural sounds that pierced the night. "You can't escape, you belong to us." They stumbled through the trees, Sarah's mind racing. Each breath felt like a battle against the very air that closed around them. Memories of the cabin, the figures surrounding it was all too much. The darkness seemed to pulse behind them, a living entity hungry to ensnare them. "Mom!" Evan cried, his voice panicked, "They're coming." Just keep running. She urged, her voice strained as she felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing upon their backs. It was like being hunted, the instinct to flee collided with the horrifying knowledge that something dark and ancient was pursuing them. She could almost hear the rustling coming closer, the whispers creeping into her thoughts again, drawing forth the very essence of dread. Just as they reached a thicket of trees, Sarah felt a tugging sensation, a force pulling her back. She stumbled, nearly losing her grip on Evan. "No! I want to let go!" She cried as she fought against the unseen grip, a terror-filled scream clawing at her throat. Evan pulled harder, his wide eyes glinting with tears. "Mom, please!" he begged, panic crackling in his voice. "We have to go." The shadows began to merge into the trees, tendrils of darkness stretching toward them like fingers. It was an unnerving sight, and instinctively, Sarah knew they needed to find shelter. "Over here!" she shouted, spotting what appeared to be a large fallen log, jagged and hollow. They dove behind it just in time as the shadows surged past, howling around them like a summer storm. Heart pounding, Sarah pressed her back against the log and pulled Evan close, whispering, "Stay quiet. We might be safe here for now." The whispers were a distant hum now, but the low growls of frustration from the shadows cut through her like icy daggers. For a moment, it felt like an eerie calm settled in, an unsettling quiet that made her skin crawl. With a deep breath, she dared to glance around the edge of the log. The clearing was chaotic, shadows swirling and colliding, but in the center was the leader, his smile now a terrifying grimace. That allure, that strange warmth of the flames had not fizzled. Instead, a flickering glow erupted from beneath the earth, illuminating the faces of those who had congregated. "Join us!" Their voices trailed through the air, silky and smooth, enticing. "Become one with the shadows." Evan shivered against her, and she brushed a hand over his hair, battling to keep her fear in check. She knew they couldn't stay here. They needed to move, to find a way back to the path, back to safety, but the forest twisted around them, each direction looking the same, a labyrinth of nightmares. "Mom?" Evan whispered, and she felt her heart break at the tremor in his voice. "What do we do?" Before she could answer, a rustling sound nearby made her entire body tense. They weren't alone. Something was coming, something that thrived in the dark, something that had been waiting for them. "I have to see," she murmured, voice barely audible. As she turned, the shadows shifted, growing more solid, more menacing. It was time to confront whatever horror awaited. They had no choice but to face the evil that had claimed these woods. But what if the darkness was not just something they could run from? What if it was a force tied to their very beings? The air thickened with the impending dread, and her instincts screamed for action. Yet, as she peered into the void ahead, something began to emerge, a figure, silhouetted against the darkness. And this one, she realized with a jolt, looked just like her. What does it mean when the forest reflects your very soul? The figure stepped forward, a ghostly imitation of Sarah, but with eyes that glowed a feral amber. The world around her twisted, leaves crunching underfoot, sounds vibrating with an unsettling familiarity. The echo of her own voice filtered through the air, taunting. "You can't escape, you belong to us," Evan gasped, instinctively clutching closer to Sarah, pressing his small body against her. "Mom, it's you," he whispered, terror spilling from his wide eyes as they darted between her and the eerie doppelganger. "No," Sarah managed, her throat dry and tight. Fear twisted inside her, churning like a storm. This wasn't just an illusion, this was something far worse, something that gnawed at the edges of her sanity. The reflection wasn't just a replica, it was a vessel of darkness, a piece of the very chaos surrounding them. The figure smiled, that same sinister grin plastered across its ghostly face, but it did not reach the depths of its eyes. "I am you, and I am more," it said, voice layered with a chorus of whispers. "You felt it, haven't you? The embrace of the shadows, the comfort in surrender. Get away from us." Sarah shouted, a surge of defiance cutting through her terror. Instinctively, she took a step backward, dragging Evan with her. She needed to pull away, to break the sickening connection, but the darkness throbbed around them, thickening the air, suffocating her resolve. Why fight what you crave? The figure continued, reaching out a hand that twisted and flickered like smoke. You are tired. You feel the pull, just like all of them. In that moment, she saw them others in the shadows, hovering just beyond sight, faces obscured but eyes glinting with ravenous hunger. Each one looked lost, enchanted by the leader and the whispers that promised power and belonging. Evan squeezed Sarah's hand tighter, eyes brimming with tears, and she could feel his panic. Mom, please. It looks just like you. What does it want? His voice shattered her focus, wrenching her back to reality. Listen to me, Evan, she choked out, forcing herself to remain strong. We have to get away. No, the doppelganger whispered harshly, its glow intensifying. You can't escape yourself. We are all connected, you and I. The forest knows your fears, your desires. It sees you. The pulsating darkness pressed in, and Sarah's breath quickened, a tide of despair surging. She felt drained, devoid of strength, as if the very life pulled from her was filling the shadows. This wasn't just a forest, it was alive, a beast feeding on their fears and regrets. Suddenly, the grounded chaos around them shifted, uprooting their lives from safety. You wouldn't choose fear over freedom, would you? The voice rose higher, layered with seduction. Join me in this realm, abandon the light. We'll be whole again. No. You're not me. Sarah screamed, expecting the sound to shatter the spell, but the words hung limply in the thick air. The figure lunged, shadows curling around Evan, tendrils reaching for them, threatening to pull them into the abyss. Run! Sarah screamed again, yanking Evan to his feet and charging down a newly formed path. The forest writhed with rage, branches clawing at them as they barreled forward. Behind them, the echo of desperate voices trailed, battling for their attention, begging them to stop. No! She cried, her heart racing as they plunged deeper into darkness. The shadows writhed and shifted, the whispers now reaching a fever pitch, clawing at their resolve. All around, other voices joined in a haunting symphony, reverberating through the trees, promising promises of power and release. Just when Sarah thought they would be swallowed whole, the path before them opened into a wider clearing. Desperate for space, they burst into the center, only to find a twisted altar rising ominously at its core. Runes glowed in the darkness, pulsating with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. But there, among the glowing symbols, stood the leader, a sly grin spreading across its face. Welcome home. What price would she pay to save Evan from what lurked in their own shadows? The atmosphere crackled with tension, shadows encircling them like a predator closing in on its prey. Sarah's heart pounded, a frantic drum echoing in the silence, rivaled only by the low, whispering chants that rose from the altar. The figure smiled wider, an unsettling expression that snaked through her thoughts like an ethereal fog. Join us, it beckoned, the ghostly tone vibrating through her bones. Fulfill what you never dared to seek. Evan's grip tightened around her wrist, knuckles whitening in fear. Mom, what does it mean? We need to leave. He tugged at her, panic lacing his voice. Fingers trembling, Sarah glanced back. The twisted altar gleamed ominously, an invitation forged from desperation. Each rune pulsing in the darkness hummed at her with an intoxicating allure. She could feel the power surging from it, promising release from pain, from guilt. Every sorrow she ever buried whispered for her to surrender. No! Sarah snapped, breaking the trance. With determination, she pulled Evan closer, instinctively shielding him. The fear pouring from her child ignited a fierce protectiveness. We can't give in. We want. The figure's expression shifted, eyes narrowing into slits. You resist, but the more you fight, the stronger I become. We are stitched from the same fabric, dear Sarah. The forest knows you, it knows every sin. Cold dread numbed her senses as the weight of its words sank in. She had always felt the shadows beckoning, the guilt for leaving things unresolved weighing her down. They were all the things she thought she could outrun. It's lying. Evan whispered sharply, but his voice wavered, uncertainty dancing in his eyes. We can't trust it. The rush of energy from the altar accelerated, creating a wind that whipped through the clearing. The leaves swirled chaotically, echoing the whispers of hidden souls searching for a master. A chorus of laughter erupted from the depths of the shadows, taunting them, gnawing at Sarah's resolve. Face what you fear. The figure swayed as it spoke, limbs twisting in motions that felt all too familiar. The truth hidden in your past. Embrace it, and you will find freedom. No! Sarah shouted, grounding herself. She could feel the breath of the forest, less like a home and more like a prison now. She turned on the spot, searching for an escape. We won't let you take us. Having no clear path, desperation clawed at her mind. The shadows shifted restlessly, feeding on her indecision, but then a glimmer of hope caught her eye, a faintly illuminated pathway to the left, hidden behind a thicket of bushes. Evan, that way. She urged, moving towards it with determination. Just as they began to run, the ground trembled beneath them, and roots burst through the earth, twisting and writhing like snakes. They lashed out, aiming to constrict them, pulling at her legs. Hold on! She yelled as she yanked Evan out of their path, adrenaline spiking. The laughter grew louder, drowning out her own heartbeat, as if the forest relished in their struggle. They had only just begun to flee, but already despair clawed at Sarah's mind like talons gripping her soul. Mom, I'm scared. Evan's voice pierced through the noise, a pure plea that tore into her heart. Me too. She admitted, instincts flaring. No more doubt, she had to keep fighting, keep moving forward. But the shadows thickened, drenching the air with darker fears as they closed in. Join us, Sarah, the figure's voice echoed, sultry and coaxing from every direction. We can escape this pain together. A flicker of darkness darted from the shadows towards Evan. No! She lunged forward, adrenaline igniting her movements. But before she could reach him, the tendrils lashed out, curling around his small frame. Evan! She screamed, feeling her own heart tear in two. The forest closed in around her in a cacophony of voices crying out for salvation, and in that agonizing moment, shadows loomed. How long could she keep this fight up? Would they find freedom, or would the darkness consume them both? The altar of glimmering runes pulsed like a beacon behind them. Its voice joining the cacophony, a chilling invitation hanging in the air. What would Sarah have to sacrifice to save her son from the very darkness that wanted to claim them both? The shadows twisted and coiled, their very essence hungry, eager to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Sarah's heart raced, each beat a desperate call for survival. Evan, she cried, pressing through the darkened thicket, her precious boy ensnared in the grips of something beyond comprehension. No! Let him go. She lunged, clawing at the dark tendrils that wrapped around Evan, coiling tighter with every second. Panic surged through her as his terrified eyes locked onto hers, filling her with a fire that surged hot in her veins. With a primal scream, she tore at the shadows. You won't take him. She summoned every ounce of strength, fueled by love, by fear, and by the desperate need to protect her son. The darkness writhed as though surprised by her defiance, giving her a moment of opportunity. Mom! Evan's voice cracked, a pitiful sound that tugged at her heart. It was then she saw the altar behind them, the glowing runes pulsing with ancient energy. It felt alive and malevolent, promising secrets and power, but she knew it held the darkness that suffocated this forest. Follow me, Evan! She shouted, pulling with all her might. With a surge of strength, she managed to rip her son from the grasp of the dark tendrils. He tumbled into her arms, gasping in fear. But the victory was fleeting, as the leader's voice echoed, reverberating through the clearing like a death knell. You cannot win against your own fears. It roared, the shadows swirling tighter, encroaching like a storm. They stumbled, breathless, but Sarah felt a flicker of clarity. We need to fight back, she declared, fear-igniting resolve. We're more than what they say. With Evan clutching her tightly, Sarah turned back to her shadowy doppelganger. The figure was a manifestation of everything she had feared and loathed about herself. But now she saw it differently. It wasn't just a reflection, it was a reminder of the strength hidden in vulnerability. Swallowing her fear, she stepped forward. I won't be afraid anymore. Her voice rang out, trembling yet fierce. This isn't who I am. The shadows hissed, recoiling as if struck. The trickle of light from the altar grew brighter, and, against her instincts, she reached toward it. Evan, let us go to the light. Together they charged through the darkness, and with each step, the shadows shrank back, like water in the wake of a ship. A cacophony of banshee screams erupted behind them, a chorus of rage, but she pressed onward, desire for freedom driving her forward. Once more she felt the oppressive air, but this time, she saw the beauty of the light ahead grow sharper. The glow flared around them, illuminating the darkness that once engulfed them. Mom! Look! Evan exclaimed, pointing toward the pulsing glow. A force pulled them, warm and vibrant, wrapping around them like a protective cocoon. They lunged, diving into the light as the shadows rushed, shrieking in fury. As they collided with the light, a wave of warmth surged through Sarah. It felt like home, a feeling of belonging and acceptance in everything she'd fought against. The darkness screamed, a forceful surge echoing as it clawed at the luminosity. But now it was on the outside, and Sarah understood she would never belong to the shadows again. Fear was not a chain, it was a challenge to overcome. In an instant, clarity washed over her. I choose light. I choose love. You don't own me. And with that declaration, the very fabric of the shadows wavered, a rippling disturbance, and just like that, the dark energy collapsed in on itself, sucked into the core of the pulsing light. The vortex of affection surrounded them, strong and unwavering, until finally, everything fell silent. Sarah opened her eyes, blinking in disbelief. They were standing in a clearing, grass beneath their feet, stars twinkling brightly above them. The whispers of the forest faded into a soft lull, the restless energy gone. Evan looked up at her, his eyes wide, confusion mingling with awe. We did it? She knelt, holding his face in her hands, tears of both relief and love pooling in her eyes. Yes. Evan. We did it. We're free. Far off, the shadows retreated into the tenebrous embrace beyond the tree-line, but their hold had weakened. Mom! Can we go home now? He asked softly, relief washing over his boyish face, the fear beginning to fade. Yes, sweetheart. Let us go home. Together they walked, hand in hand, the path illuminated under the shafts of moonlight. As they stepped onto the road back to the farmhouse, Sarah felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of her own shadows. They may have faced darkness, but now they emerged whole together and unyielding. As they reached home, the old farmhouse appeared welcoming once more, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Mom? Evan asked nervously, glancing back. The forest, it won't come for us, will it? With a tender smile, she brushed her hand through his hair and whispered, as long as we stand together, we have the power to keep the darkness at bay. That darkness can't touch us anymore. And in that moment, she knew they had transformed, learning to embrace the light despite the shadows that lingered, old stories quelled but never forgotten. As they settled in, preparing for the day ahead, they understood they had found their strength in unity, lighting their own path against the encroaching night. The world may always hold shadows, but they wouldn't allow them to define who they were. Now is the moment. If you want to hear more stories that push the limits of your imagination, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel. Don't get left behind in the dark. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more listeners hungry for thrill. And flood the comments section with your thoughts, your reactions, and the theories swirling in your minds. I want to hear every word. Lastly, don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these critical actions.